Welcome to the Enlightenment Evolution Hour. I am your host, Rob Gauthier, the ET Whisperer. The Enlightenment Evolution Hour is a part of the Enlightenment Evolution Network. Any ideas expressed by the guest, myself, or commenters may not necessarily reflect the same opinions of the Enlightenment Evolution Network. Enlightenment defined. It is the state of giving or receiving greater knowledge and understanding about a certain subject or situation. Evolution defined. The gradual development of something, especially from a simple to more complex form. So what is Enlightenment evolution? The state of giving and receiving greater knowledge as we develop from a simple to more complex human being living on Earth for our soul's experience. Welcome now and join us as we explore our Enlightenment Evolution Hour together. The Enlightenment Evolution Hour is simulcast live every Wednesday at 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific from the Enlightenment Evolution Hour page, Matrix Minds Facebook page, and the ET Whisper YouTube channel. It is also redistributed from the Forbidden Knowledge News Network and Conscious Awakening Network. Hey everybody, welcome to the Enlightenment Evolution Hour. I'm your host, Rob Gauthier. Today we have an amazing guest, and we will be bringing Paul in just a little bit. Before we do that, to some of your dismay and to others' delight, we have our announcements that we've got to do. As far as the show announcements, next week we have RJ Spino, who will be here with us. And after that, we have a few other people booked up before the new year, but the new year is going to come and there will not be a show on the first Wednesday of the year. That is the week of Kalina and my own birthday, so we take that time off. After that, we're going to have a lot of amazing guests, and we will be announcing those on all of the social medias where you follow us, so just keep your eyes peeled for that. Network announcement, if you go to Instagram Live and go to @OutThereTalk, you'll have Out There Talk with Valiant himself, which is an Instagram Live show, and it also is a Tuesday and Wednesday at 11:59 p.m. Eastern. You can always join Valiant himself over there and check out his show. It's a 1-hour Instagram Live show, and he's got an amazing guest for all things that are out there. And myself, Kalina, and many of the guests we've had on have been on the show too, so you might want to go check that out if you're interested. As far as it goes, ET Whisper announcements, there's a lot, but I'm going to condense it. As far as the first thing we have coming up is in February, the Conscious Life Expo. I will be there. I do not think Kalina or Baby Lilith will be with us, but we will be there for sure at the Sedona Transcendence event, or the Sedona Ascension event, which is going to be in March, and there are details on the website, etwhisper.com. You can go there and check those out. That's a 3-day conference. As you guys know, our dear friends Daryl Ankel will be there, Wendy Kennedy, Sean Swanson, a lot of other really great presenters. That's going to be a fun one, and Lily and Kalina will be with me there. So if you wanted to meet Kalina and Lily, if you've already met me, or if you want to meet us all for the first time, all three of us will be at that event. It's going to be an amazing one. I did that event in October, the smaller version of that event, and it was really great. Suzanne Ross, who runs those events, is a really good person, and she does really good events. So check it out if you're interested. As far as the channel panel 25 in Sedona, we're going to have announcements for that in the next 2 or 3 weeks. We're going to get a list of at least initial people who we're going to have coming. We're in the process of doing that now, but stay tuned for that, and we'll be connecting with you guys about that as soon as you do. Any of the social medias that you follow is great, but if you really want to know what's going on at all times, every time we have an update, go to the email list on the website and then sign up. It pops up about 30 seconds after you're on there. You put in your email and the rest is history. You'll be kept in the loop better than probably all the social medias put together. But that is it, guys. I want to talk about our guest who we have today here. Our guest is an amazing guest, and I'm sure a lot of you already know him. Paul Selig is considered one of the foremost spiritual channelers working today. In his breakthrough works of channeled literature, I Am the Word, the Book of Love and Creation, the Book of Knowing and Worth, the Book of Mastery, the Book of Truth, the Book of Freedom, and Beyond Known Trilogy, Realization, Alchemy, and The Kingdom, author and medium Paul Selig has recorded an extraordinary program for personal and planetary evolution as humanized awakens its own divine nature. But I could probably read you dozens of pages about this guy. He's been around for a long time. I think better than telling you about him is to introduce him himself. So welcome, Paul. Thank you for coming today. I know you're a busy guy, and I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, thank you. I want to start with you where I start with all of our guests. I want to get to your story, and I know that's probably the most boring thing you ask probably every interview you do. Hey, how did you get to where you are? But I want to know a bit more than that. I want to know before that, like when you're a child, some of the things that might have influenced you to have the personality traits and to be open to the experience that you had. What were kind of those younger year shaping things and events that occurred?
I'm not sure how to answer this. I mean, I was a sensitive kid. I grew up in a weird time. I was in New York City, and I grew up in the 1960s. I was born into a family that was somewhat atheistic, and there was no real identity around spirituality other than it was to be sort of dismissed. I had a few experiences when I was a kid that were psychic and, to me, extraordinary, but I never would have thought of myself as psychic, just probably too sensitive. I didn't know what clairsentience was. I didn't know that I was quite busy, probably trying to manage everybody else's energy when I was a kid. I was just sort of doing my best. But I wasn't looking for this. I didn't know that I had permission to have a spiritual life until something like that became essential. And I think that there was a part of me, even when I was very young, who longed for God or whatever you want to call it. But it was this thing that other people had or had experiences of, and certainly not me and not where I was. I mean, in New York in the 60s, we didn't go to church or to temple, you went to therapy. So that was my background. And how I managed, my life was, I think, as best I could at the time with the tools that I had.
Well, that's fascinating. Yeah, and New York City in the 1960s was definitely an interesting place and time from everything I've heard about it and seen from it. Um, so, what took you from that kid who just did the best they could through their experiences, having that, to getting to the place where you first started connecting to spirit or connecting to that other types of consciousness?
Mhm. Well, it wasn't planned. I was 25. I was a year out of graduate school at Yale. I had this hot career that was supposed to be happening, and by all accounts would. I developed a nice alcohol problem, and was getting addicted to other things. And I was working on a project in St. Paul, Minneapolis, St. Paul, and I didn't know where to find the drugs in St. Paul. And I was staying at this place called the Gopher Campus Motor Lodge, which had a giant gopher on a spit spinning outside my window. And I guess I just got scared. And, the Gideons leave Bibles in drawers in hotel rooms. And I don't know why, but I pulled it out and it said prayer for people in crisis. And I said it and I meant it. And I don't know why, but I said it and I meant it. And then I forgot about it. And then, pardon me, 3 days later, I was back in New York, and I think I spent my last dollar. And I woke up and I asked myself what I could do for myself that day that was positive, and I actually heard a voice. Um, and it was the first, and it told me what to do, and I did it. And that was the beginning of an unfoldment. that I think has continued. I'm still managing as best I can with the tools that I have. I just think that the tools have changed because I've been with this for a while. But I always have to say, I'm a channeler and a psychic, and my job is kind of a stenography. I'm not a spiritual teacher and certainly not a guru. But the process of unfoldment began when I was 25. And shortly after that, I heard that there was this thing happening that people were calling the harmonic convergence, and that people were going to be waking up. And I thought, well, if there is a God or something like a God, and I was starting to think perhaps there was, and you asked to be woken up, why would it want to say no? So I went up to the roof of this building I was living in Manhattan at the time, the night before this event, and somebody had given me a crystal, and somebody had given me a mantra, and I thought you needed the crystal and the mantra to wake up. But I went up to the roof and I asked in retrospect with a great deal of innocence and willingness and hope that something could happen. And something did, and I don't know what it was. And sometimes I think I was just hyperventilating up there. People later said it sounded like a spontaneous Kundalini awakening. The mantra I was given to work with was a Kundalini mantra, but I didn't know what Kundalini was. I just knew that I had this experience of energy moving through me and out through the top of my head that kind of left me frozen on this roof. And then I started seeing little lights around people after that, whether that was connected or not. And so, I'd heard a voice and I'd listened to it, and I was beginning to see lights and I'd felt energy. So the rug was kind of being pulled out from under me in terms of how I thought the world was working and what I thought I was supposed to be in the world, and everything that I had aspired to, everything was starting to sort of fall apart. And it did for a while. The clairaudience didn't really reveal itself until a little later. I mean, there were a couple of episodes where I would get a message and I would listen to it because I was startled, because it's never really what I want to hear. And it's never very convenient to what I want. But I studied a form of energy healing, and I found that when I had my hands on people's bodies, I began to hear things for them. So my work has always been in service of other people, really, not for me. I don't read for myself terrifically well. But I was accessing information that was being proven out. And as that began to happen, I just began to trust the radio station that I was tuned into. And then what became the channeling followed, in stages over the next number of years.
I really appreciate and love the fact that you say, I'm a channeler, I'm a stenographer, I'm not a spiritual teacher. I know a lot of people who listen to channeling put the channelers in that perspective, that there's something special, godlike,
Yeah.
and some channelers use that to their own self-benefit and try to amp that up. But I really appreciate and love that as a fact that you do that. And the other thing that you said too that I wanted to ask about was you're not too good at doing readings for yourself. I've
Yeah.
noticed that most psychics I've ever met, most channelers, most intuitive people, they are their own blind spot. Have you ever understood why that kind of works that way?
Well, some of it is just that I have desires for outcomes. And so my filter still, when it comes to me, is what I hope for, what I would long for, what I would like to be. And I can't be as neutral for myself as I can for others. I have gotten very accurate information for myself at times, but usually not when I'm looking for it. And the guides that I work with will often come through with messages for me when I'm teaching others. And they'll stop and say, we have to say a few things to Paul. And it's probably because it's not what I would normally want to listen to. If I was doing the dishes and I started to hear this and I didn't like it, I just focus on the dishes, But if I've got people listening, the agreement with me and these guides have always been, I'm going to keep talking until they say stop. And so if that's included in what they want to say, it's a way for them to give me information, that I may need. But in terms of, stuff in the world and, am I going to date this person, or is this going to work out the way that I want it to? I can get some stuff, But if I'm neutral to the outcome, I'm going to be far more effective. It's why I can read for other people and be effective, because I don't really care if they get the promotion, or whatever's on their agenda or their menu for what they want to know about. I can be neutral enough to be able to tune in to see really where they're at and perhaps what they need, which may be vastly different from what they think they want or need.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. The expectations that we have and desire for outcomes, and yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
I want to go back to then the unfolding. You talked about multiple layers of
Yeah.
channeling throughout the years. That's something that I found has been true with most channelers who do channeling as a profession and who do it long term.
Uh-huh.
They find different levels of expansion through their channeling.
Mhm.
Can you share a little bit about some examples of that expansion, or just maybe the dynamic of it from your perspective?
Yeah. When it first started, you know how like you have maybe a white noise band of just mental chatter, I had that and very loudly. And initially, what I would hear would be something that managed to break through the chatter of my own mind. And in retrospect, it probably was because my field and my whole energy system was pretty dense and it took a lot of work. I started doing a little group in my apartment when I was maybe 31 years old or something like that, to, I thought, do the work that my old teacher was doing with, energy, because I was very interested in the energy work, not information. And the very first meeting in my apartment, I began to hear things for the group, and it was the beginning of channeling. But initially, I was hearing fragments and then instructions of how to work with energy and attunements to bring through energy. And I was always far more interested in the energy that came through because it was palpable. I could feel it, everybody in the room could feel it. And we were having a shared experience that whoever was giving us the information was directing. So that was the initial stage, and that went on for a number of years. The energy was hugely palpable, but I wasn't interested in the information. And I didn't necessarily trust it. I didn't, who was I to do this? I would say, I think I hear, I think I hear, I think I hear. But I continued to do this work. And the attunements kept coming and the energy kept coming and we kept meeting. So I did this group for about 18 years before I got to be known for this. And I wasn't intending to be known. I was a college professor. I was kind of doing this under the radar as much as I could because I wanted to maintain my jobs. I had a couple of academic gigs. One of the places knew about it, one of them didn't. And it wasn't until there was beginning to get to be some exposure at a larger level that I had to say, well, yeah, this is who I am and what I do. When I was 48 and I'm 62 now, I was told by the guides that I needed to stop smoking cigarettes. They said, well, we would love to continue to work with you, but we will not be able to unless you attend to this. And I actually stopped the next day, and I've been a 4-pack a day guy. I could channel and smoke out the window. I loved it, but it was probably
Wow.
killing. Yeah, I mean, it was nothing. Every ability I have when I quit drinking is when the psychic gifts began. That they started to open up. When I quit smoking, everything opened up. And what happened was that I began to lecture in channel, and all I knew was that I was talking more because I still wasn't that interested in what was being said. I was interested in the energy that came with the instruction. And a medium that I knew found out that I was not recording and transcribing these lectures and was a little outraged. And so I made myself sit down with a recording and transcribe it. And I've never really enjoyed listening to myself channel. It's awkward the way it comes through me. I wish it was more elegant, but it's just the way it comes through. But I transcribed the lecture, and it was, I don't know, 5 or 7 pages that was immaculate and needed no editing. And I had been a writer with the worst case of writer's block of anybody I've ever known. And that was a source of great humiliation because I was actually running a writing program at a graduate school and I was teaching college writing elsewhere. And it was like, oh my God, I couldn't do it anymore. So 5 pages, no editing. I was fascinated, and every week I would see if it would happen again after every evening group. And it did. And once I became willing to transcribe, and it was clear the guides, this is part of a longer story, but they said, we have a book to write, and if you take 2 weeks, we'll do it. And that's when the book started. Once I became willing to put, the stuff in writing to transcribe. And since then, it's just continued to grow. I feel that they've refined my system through this work. There's no effort in this at all. It's just really, at least for me, and I know people work differently, it's like turning the dial on a radio to another station. It just takes a second, and suddenly the other broadcast is present. I'm not trying to channel, I'm just turning the dial to the station that the guides play. When I'm reading and working psychically, I just tune into the station that is the person I'm reading for or the people that they ask about. I don't talk to dead people when I do readings, but they call me a medium for the living. So if you haven't talked to your sister for 5 years and you give me her name, I can probably tune into her and I might start to look like her when I do it, which is interesting to me. But it's the same skill set. It's just operating at a very different level. So that's it. So now it's just fluid, and they've actually dictated now 12 books through me. The 12th book was finished a couple of months ago. And none of the books need any editing. They're just, I don't even transcribe them anymore, which is a great luxury. It used to take far longer to type them up than to dictate them. So now I just, the videotapes of the lectures just get sent off, and all of the books are done publicly now, in front of groups of people online or in live events. And that's nice too, because the guides I work with need people to listen. There's got to be an active listener in order for me to be in this exchange.
That's fascinating. It's actually mind-blowing. A book could be done in 2 weeks. Even with transcription, it's a hard it's a hard process. So that's amazing.
Well, that was the first book. It was 2.5 weeks. I took 2 days. They said they said we have a book to write if you give us 2 weeks. And it took 2 weeks and 2 days because I took 2 days off to teach at NYU. But now the books might take a month or two, but only because I'm not working for hours every day. I can, when I'm doing a live event and I have to do, say, 5 hours in front of people a day, they'll do 80 pages in 5 days of a book, which is why they get done so expediently. But they're prepared. I'm just really plugged in and taking the dictation. But yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And as you're talking about your old days in New York and doing the channeling for small groups, I actually was speaking to Alan Steinfeld when he was on the show, and he was talking about how he was in that initial group of people who first and he said it was an extraordinary thing for him to watch and to hear, and really was excited to try to get you out there and wanted you to connect with people. So yeah, I'm glad to hear that too. I want to talk about your books too, but I also want to talk to you about the tuning in process, because it's always interesting me to talk to other channelers. No channeler works the same. And anytime I've ever asked them this question, you said it's just a process where you're kind of tuning into that energy. Do you always know who you're connecting with, or is it something that's not really important to you? How does it work when you're trying to connect with an energy?
Well, I don't try to connect with an energy. That's the whole thing. There's really no effort in this. So I'm not seeking. Let me see if I can explain this. There's a consistency of the voice or the collective that I work through that I trust at this level. The cadence of the sentences, the word choices are all things that I'm very comfortable with and familiar with. So when they come through to lecture and they come through prepared, I tend to start off, I do a little prayer protection before I start. And part of the reason I do that is I think some of it's just, hygienics, but it allows me to recede in consciousness. I used to imagine myself climbing into the backseat of a car and turning the steering wheel over to the guides. And then I'm still aware, I'm a conscious channel, But if I hear something that I don't understand or is confusing or feels wrong, I interrupt, and I interrupt with some frequency. And they'll say, now it's in the books, Paul is interrupting, Paul has a question, and they'll usually address it. But the process is that I will hear one phrase repeated, incessantly. And then the moment I give voice to that one phrase, everything tumbles out right on top of it. And then the lecture just goes. And sometimes it's a mile a minute, so much so that, you actually have to probably play the recording on a slower speed to really discern what's being said. And because it's so rapid, when I start late, if I have an hour to speak, or they have an hour to speak, and I start 10 minutes late, they've been known to go a mile a minute to use that 50 minutes to get the hour lecture in. So that's that process. And the process of reading for people, I generally use the name of the person as a coordinate. It's like a form of psychometry. The name, if you say, my name is so-and-so, and I tune into you, I actually become you. I feel like it is to be as you. And there's a whole litany of physical gestures and language codes that I'm familiar with, that I work with to interpret. So, and then, and again, I'm physical. So when I channel, the guides actually, I haven't seen it, but everybody talks about it, is, my eyes often go very, very pale blue when I'm channeling. And I assume others do this as well. When I'm stepping into somebody who's living and has a body, I might grimace the way they do, or do the gesture that they do, or use the phrasing that they do. But really, all I'm doing is using them as the coordinate to step into. I used to think, when I was first starting, that I was traveling to them, like I was flying across the ocean to channel, to tune into that person in China. And it was actually the physicist Dean Radin who said to me, the very first time I worked publicly, which was at a little conference at the Esalen Institute, where they had invited me to do this in front of some academics and scientists and other writers. He said, you're not traveling there, you're going within. So I didn't understand anything about how this worked. And truthfully, I still don't. I mean, because you do this and you speak to so many people, you probably have a much greater awareness of the process. And in some ways, I've been very insular in this experience. I do it in front of people, but I've done it, not in a vacuum, but in a very sort of insular way. Since I've been doing it, it's only in the last couple of years that I started meeting people in the field. But for whatever reason, like, I would buy everybody's books and then just not read them. And some of it, I think, was to kind of keep, and the guides I work with, where I think party to this, it's sort of keeping whatever their message is on point, so that it's not informed by the stuff of the moment that people are talking about. I'm always happy to hear what they're talking about coincides with what other information that other channels are getting, because I find that validates what I get, but I don't understand it. So I don't know if I answered your question about how it works, but I tried.
No, it's beautiful, and I appreciate that too. I am the same way. I don't listen to other channelers, but I met a lot of channelers who enjoy listening to other channeling.
Mhm.
And for me, it's as much to do with a lack of time, as it is with a desire not to have influence over anything. But yeah, the question I had too with you about the experiences that you have. You said that you can take on those mannerisms and things like that. And I've seen that happen in mostly really great channelers. Most of them are trance. Some of them aren't. Some of them are semi-conscious. Like Jane Roberts, you can see Seth coming in, complete transformation. To me, that usually means a lack of filtering. And I think because all the things that you've said about just kind of not caring about that part of it and just enjoying what you hear and kind of seeing what information comes through, it probably gives you that. But when you're doing these specific channelings, is there any semi-trance that you're going into, or is it 100% conscious?
I don't know how to answer that, because I don't know what to compare it to. People have tried to hypnotize me, and the problem is I'm so familiar with being in that state because it's where I go when I channel, you know? So it's like, well, it's almost too easy. And maybe they're just not taking me deep enough.
Is there a loss of memory at all, or are you
Well, I
familiar
will
with
say this.
everything?
I remember, I work in a weird way. I hear phrases and then I repeat it. So I whisper and repeat. Sometimes I go direct. When they go direct, I don't remember a damn thing. And it's a little frightening to me. It feels fairly out of control because I'm just aware of sound, that I'm making sounds, you know, vowels and consonants that sound like words, but I'm not retaining it. When I whisper and repeat, I'm able to be in inquiry with what I hear. So it's only in the last, I would say, 8, 9, 10 months that there have been periods where they've been channeling more directly without the whisper repeat. And it just may be that I'm just past caring, you know, at this point. I don't, you know, maybe part of the reason is that I know that how I appear when I do this is challenging and difficult, and it is very physical. I saw a little video of Jane Roberts channeling, and I completely understood it. You know, I understood what was happening with her physically and how the body was being worked with. Because when I'm channeling, I don't sit like I sit. I don't. My arms do what they're going to do. There are these weird gestures. It's all this stuff. But I think that there are different levels of being receded. When they're doing a book lecture or they're lecturing, especially the book lectures, because that's so precise. And I often feel that they're showing up with something that has been pre-prepared and they're literally just giving it to me phrase by phrase by phrase so that it makes it to the page appropriately. When I'm reading for somebody, it's a little bit more like I'm not in the back seat of the car, I'm in the front seat and we're turning the wheel back and forth. If I'm doing a live event and somebody asks a question for the guides, and I've just been doing more psychic stuff, which is a bit of a different, it's just a different energy field. I won't feel that I'm in as deeply. But when I'm in as deeply, I usually say I retain about a third of what they've said. And mostly it just goes because I'm hearing it in the phrase. I don't hear the whole sentence, I hear the phrase. The people listening are putting those phrases together in a linear narrative that I don't notice until I see it typed up and I go, wow, that made sense. You know, that was always the fear is, you know, I would be doing a book and they would say something and the sentence would go off into the middle of nowhere, or they'd start say, we have a story for you today, which they do sometimes in the books. And I go, oh my God, I hope this story hasn't ended because they're saying we have a story. And, you know, I'm primed for whatever they're going to do, but I don't know the next phrase until it's delivered.
I see. Yeah, that sounds like a mixture of a semi-conscious and in some ways a full trance. That's fascinating. And I've only seen you channel a few times, and it was always the whisper repeat,
Yeah, yeah.
and so that okay, that gives me a lot better reference too. All right, so thank you for sharing your journey. First of all, it's fascinating, and I always love hearing these different aspects of different channelers. Let's take us to where you're at now. Right now, I know a big part of your work focuses on your literature, doing lectures and books, and I also know you do a lot of live events. Um, share some of that with us. Share what a day in the life of you looks like while you're doing the channeling.
Well, you know, I live on Maui now. I was in New York, and before COVID, I was traveling at least half the month every month and doing events. And the books are done during the events usually now. So we sort of, you know, two birds with one stone. But, you know, I have a simple life. I mean, I do a fair amount online. I do an intensive every month, and I see clients a few days a week. And, you know, the rest of the time I'm living in the rainforests and I'm still learning how to drive. So I can't get anywhere. So I might as well just be here. Um, but, you know, I don't think about this work unless I'm doing it. You know, it's such an immediate experience for me. So it's not, you know, oh my goodness, we have to channel today. It's like I'm playing with a dog and then I have to get to the computer and get out of the way enough to be effective in the work for the 2 hours or whatever it is that I'm doing it in front of people. And then I go off and do my own thing again. When I'm on the road and I'm traveling a lot more than I used to, that's an interesting thing because I've gone to this funny place. I enjoy the work that I do. And I was a college teacher. I'm comfortable sitting in front of people and holding a space. I'm personally very, very shy socially. So it's an opportunity for me to be around people as best I can be. But when I'm doing the events, they're fairly grueling. I channel in a day-long workshop, probably for 4 hours of information, and an hour of questions or half and half. So they're lecturing and then they're taking questions and they're working with energetic attunements, because that's maybe some of the things that the guys that I work with do that may be unique to this process is they're working with energy attunements and they're supporting all of their students and working with the energy. And they do that, in group settings where people are having a shared experience of working with the vibration and the level of tone or alignment that the attunements claim and support people in experiencing. And so that kind of wipes me out. So all I really want is a nice hotel and a really nice meal at the end of the day. Like, I do it all for the good meal at the end of the day. That's like, I want the payoff. I'm a little much of I'm a bit of a toddler that way. Like, where's my present? I worked hard. That's that.
Well, it's channeling can be, and I've met different people who relate differently to this idea, but channeling for me has always kind of taken energy, even though it gives back a rewarding sense and mental energy. Energetically, it kind of takes a lot. So 4 hours is a channeling marathon. That's actually quite amazing. So the work that you're doing now, being able to do the books inside of that is absolutely amazing. The newest book that you just did recently was the Book of Innocence.
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit about kind of the premise of this book and what it's meant to convey? Because each of these books I've seen that you've done are a book about one very specific topic and one overall ideology that can help us in our daily life. So what does the Innocence book teach us that the other ones haven't?
There's an idea in the Book of Innocence, and honestly, the only time I've read it is when I had to do the audiobook. So and they've since channeled a whole other book. So, and they're always channeling something beyond it. It's part of a structure and a built structure of maintaining a level of consciousness in what they call the upper room. And the upper room, they say, is the octave of vibration above what they call the common field, which is the reality that we know. So the guides don't speak about dimensional realities. They use musical terms more than anything else. So they say that there's a part of all of us that exists in what they call the upper room. And that's the divine self or the true self or the monad. They call it different things. And the realization of this aspect of self, inclusive of form and body, at this higher level of alignment is where they're bringing us to. What I found curious about the Book of Innocence was that there's a real emphasis on the idea of memory. And they say we're existing in a common field that has in this agreement to separation. We're separate from each other and we're separate from source. And consequently, which they say is not true. It's a conceit and a belief that we've given great evidence to, and we created in a manifest state. Our experience of being is in most ways an experience of separation. And they say all memory, our personal memory and our collective memory, is unfortunately claimed through a lens of separation. And so all of our memory is essentially distorted or corrupted in some ways by a false belief. So they say that the common field, which is the reality that we know, is so informed by fear that we don't even know we're enacting it, but we expect it to be there, and so it is. It's like, swimming in a pool that somebody's already peed in. It's just what you don't know it, but it's what you get at this level. And the idea of reclaiming memory in the higher field is not about pretending that things didn't happen. It is about reseeing things so that we're not replicating the old. The guides say that the personality structure, they call it sometimes the small self, there's nothing wrong with it. It's part of who we are. But they say the small self knows itself entirely through history. It doesn't really have the new idea. And so the best of it can do is replicate itself. They say, for example, that we've lived on a planet with war for so very long, we expect it. And consequently, we get it. And we're always having it. And until we move to a level of consciousness or alignment where war is not a possibility or even a possible choice, we're going to have what we've had. So the Book of Innocence is about a level of restoration to a level of consciousness or tone or alignment where what is your true nature, which is in innocence, born in innocence, and I suppose because they call on language that's been used in religion, but they do it in their own weird way, is without sin, or the idea of sin, which is basically agreement to what they call the denial of the divine. The guides say the denial of the divine is the only real problem humanity faces, and that what we see around us that's so challenging is basically our evidence of separation, which holds a basis in fear, which is the denial of source. So the part of us that is innocent knows itself already in union with source because it can't align to the other. It doesn't align to fear. It has never known fear. It doesn't hold a basis for a reality that aligns at that level. And when that part of self becomes in flower, for lack of a better word, or it becomes expressed in what they call the upper room, they say that the individual becomes kind of like a transmitter or a portal to the upper room, to this level of vibration that holds this truth. And they say this is how a world is made new, through co-resonance. So I don't know if that made any sense, but that was an attempt.
No, it's fascinating. And so have your guides ever spoke to you about this idea of distortion, bad beliefs, forgetting, not living in the divine, as something that's explicitly done on the earth plane or on the planet of Earth? Or is this something that happens frequently elsewhere? Or why specifically Earth does these things, like have these horrible beliefs about war?
Well, they say we chose it. It's become obvious. We can learn through anything. We have free will. So we can learn through anything we choose. They say we can learn the folly and futility of war by fighting until there's nobody left standing. If we want to learn that way, we can. They say that we're not going to. They don't talk about other planets. They don't talk about other realities per se. They talk about octaves, and they say that everything is existing in the omnipresent now, and that we like to enact the belief in separation. I remember the very first time I did a book talk, which was after the very first book. It was at the old Bodhi Tree in Los Angeles, the bookstore. I think maybe 5 people came. Nobody knew who I was, and I was just happy 5 people came. And I read a little bit of the book, and one of the people in the front row raised her hands, and she said, this is like what the Galactic Federation's saying, and what do your guides say about those evil aliens?
Uh-oh.
I know. And the guides who were not talking piped right in. I mean, they were like, and they went, ha, 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 ha. Isn't it bad enough that you have to, vilify everybody here? Now you have to do it, with the other reality, with the other planets. Isn't it bad enough that you can't get along here? You have to create this elsewhere. And that was their response to this. And that's the only time I've heard them speak about that. What I understand a little bit about the separation is that we chose it through not trusting source. For example, I was teaching recently, and they were using this example of, you plant your lettuce, and then your neighbor comes and steals your lettuce, so you build a wall, and then you build a bigger wall, and then you build ammunition, to get to them on their side of the wall, so that nobody's going to get to your lettuce, which is really a belief in scarcity, that there's not enough and that there can't be enough, and that consequently we have to protect what we have. And we end up creating all of these schisms, which are really, according to them, baseless. I mean, there's nothing wrong with celebrating your background, and enjoying the uniqueness of how we all show up. But finally, they say we're all one. That's it. Always have been, always. Everything else is just an idea that we've claimed as form. And we use it as best we can as an opportunity to learn. But they've also said that there are other ways to get your lessons. You don't have to learn that if you put your hand in the fire, you're going to get burned by putting your hand in the fire. There are other ways to understand these things without an indoctrination, to pain through fear and aversion.
Yeah, and that scarcity thing is very profound, and that is the
Mhm.
reason why the interactions between us and other human beings ends up always ending in the way that it does on a
Yeah.
collective level. Yeah, that makes sense. Um, so the experiences that we have being so much the filtering level from our beliefs and perspectives, letting go of learning those lessons. Do they give any insight on how to do it? Because a lot of people are mentally locked. They use their mental
Yeah.
energy, and a lot of people use emotional, and some people can use both. But do they give us kind of any techniques or ideas how to get through releasing these beliefs that are so rough for so many of us?
Well, yeah, I mean, they do, and that's the energy work. So the books are all energetic transmissions that work directly with the reader. And so, the texts are informed with, they say the language is encoded with vibration. And when the very first book came out, nobody again knew who I was. And the reviews started coming on Amazon. People started saying, I'm reading this book and my body is vibrating. I'm reading this book and I'm seeing auras. And it's kind of always been that way. I don't think that we can do this through force of will. I think will is utilized, which is the willingness to change, but that the actual change is more alchemical than we think. So they say that this aspect of us, which they call the divine self or the monad, sometimes they call it the Christed self or the eternal self, through these attunements, and there's a series of them, which align us to another level of vibration, and it builds in increments. When you lift to what they call the upper room, there's a claim that they make once you align there, which is the claim, I have come, I have come, I have come. And they say it's not Paul or Rob saying, I have come, it's the divine self or the I am presence or the God within, Paul or Rob or anybody, that announces that. They say that once that's claimed, you're actually putting in motion a process where what has been held in shadow is going to be brought to light. And this isn't fun. The book that they wrote about that was Alchemy, and it was a bitch because I went through it. That was the only book that they ever dictated that I thought should come with a warning label on it, because my stuff was flying through that period, and it was not easy. For me, maybe it is for other people, but maybe I was just more attached to my pain. So how these things get moved, I suspect, is through agreement, which they say is a chord, and they'll say ACCORD or ACHORD is on a piano. And vibrational accord is moving to a level of alignment where these things don't play out, or you're not aligning to them because you're releasing the need or the requirement for them as being the ways of knowing the self. So the guides say we always have these frames that we walk around with, like we're holding up a picture frame. And the purpose of that frame is to fill itself with what we expect. So we're always getting what we expect, like it or not. And if my frame is the world sucks, that's my world, and I'm going to continue to perpetuate that by manifesting or calling into accord with that claim. And so what they're doing with us is releasing the frames, or at least expanding the frames so that we can begin to experience what exists beyond the personality self's design of what should be based on what was. So I don't think it has to be that hard, but I do think it's rarely comfortable. It's hard to see yourself. It's hard to look at what you don't want to look at. It's hard to look at what's gotten swept under the rug. And I think we're in a period where we're all having to do this at a collective level. The guides dictated a book called The Book of Truth. And that was shortly before the, I don't know, the election in, what was it, 2000, I don't know, before 220, whatever that election was between Clinton and Trump. And they said, what's about to happen is everything that's been hidden is about to be revealed. And the purpose of that is not to point fingers and blame. It's because nothing gets addressed, nothing gets seen until it's brought to light. And they've said for a long time, if you've got a dead body buried in the basement, it's going to stink up the whole house eventually. And so we're in this process. And that seems to be the process of reclamation that they teach, which is the divine self encountering that which has denied it and reclaiming it in a higher way. And that's in a lot of ways the process of the books, collectively the books.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful aspect. I actually usually talk about that time in our collective through the pandemic and before that, how kind of everything was a little crazy. So you feel like bringing out all of those things that are wrong in our collective mindset and showing it in front of all, that was kind of the purpose for that whole experience.
I think there's more to it than that. And I think it's easy to simplify things, but I think that was some of the opportunities granted. What we thought was perhaps wasn't, what we believed in, what would have been tolerated suddenly wasn't. I mean, we've been pretending, I think. We've been pretending to be kind to one another. There's systemic racism and bigotry and, all kinds of corruption, whatever area you want to look at. In the very first book, which was called I Am the Word, the guides said, and this was in 2009, they said, humanity is at a time of reckoning, and a reckoning is a facing of oneself and all of one's creations. And everything that's been created in fear needs to be recreated or reknown in a higher way. And so in some ways, if you think of a house where the cement, the mortar was, fear, the house may crumble a bit if what's been holding it together, can't abide in the higher level of tone. They say that the whole field, the field that we're all operating in, is escalating. And so this other stuff really just can't hang out anymore, but it may be putting up one hell of a fight on its way out. That's how I understand it.
Yeah, it sure did, and yeah, that's a very fascinating way to see it too. I want to kind of go through this thing too with you as a process, reframing and taking a new frame of life. This is a conversation I literally had yesterday with someone. We were talking about how, yes, we need to be able to see things in a better light. We need to be able to self-empower. We need to shift our belief systems. But still, there can be that raw emotion that hits back when you try to reframe something. That's the thing that this person was talking about with me, that they just couldn't get through. Yeah, I can think better thoughts, but when I feel bad emotions, it doesn't seem real. Then it just seems like I'm trying to fake or trying to create.
Yeah.
So is there anything to it? Is it a fake it till you make it routine,
No,
or is it?
not at all. People talk about spiritual bypassing. And I think when, you can know the truth about something, I can know that I'm having an emotional reaction that's probably disproportionate to what's really happening. I can understand that, but suppressing this stuff isn't necessarily helpful. To use it to harm another is not required. And that's probably something that could well be repressed and worked through in another way. But, while the guides address psychology, I guess, they're talking about something different. The guides have said since the very, very beginning in their writings that this is not self-help. That self-help is in most ways the personality self or the small self trying to fix the small self, and it doesn't really work at that level. And so when you move into spiritual answers with things, I don't think it's about walking around miserable with a 20-pound crystal around your neck saying namaste and smiling and pretending you're happy. I don't think that's it at all. And I think, having whatever the authentic experience is and moving through that will get you to the other side. And if you need help to get through that, get the help needed. It's there, and it comes in different forms, whether it's, therapy or a spiritual practice or a community. All of these things can be available. But the reframing, the guides do it this way, that one of the attunements that they work with, again, they say is claimed by the true self. So the claim is, I know who I am in truth, which is identity. I know what I am in truth, manifestation. I know how I serve in truth, expression. And the divine self as who, which is a reframing of who we think we are at a large level, and what we are as form, and service, which we tend to think in this culture as what we do for a living or how we help people in a practical way, is actually also being reframed as your expression. The guides say, how one serves is how one is most fully expressed as the true self, which is the vibrational field. And that vibrational field in an acted state, in an expressed state, is actually transforming what it encounters through co-resonance, because it lifts what it encounters. So it's not because I've had enough, I've been through addiction, I've been through pain, everybody has been through their own stuff. I'm not special. But some people, I think, are of the belief that this is supposed to be easy. And I don't know that it's always easy. When I was maybe 25 and newly sober, 26 or something like that, I went to a meditation somebody was offering, where she had everybody sort of do this little meditation where they saw their spiritual path unfolding. And at the time I was near homeless. I think I had holes in my socks, so I didn't want to take my shoes off at the thing. I was, it was like, I was in a rough state, but I was sincere in my devoutness towards whatever this possible spiritual stuff was. And people went around and said, oh, I was walking down the road and the flowers were blooming and the bluebirds were singing. And, what I saw was like the witch's castle in The Wizard of Oz, where you had to climb up it with a pickaxe and it was jagged and hard. But I think I was very invested in it being hard, but my experience was that it was hard. And my experience now is that it does not have to be. We don't have to seek out pain. But I don't know that anybody grows without discomfort. And our aversion to discomfort, I think, is something that we have to look at culturally. And even in spiritual communities, it's bad to feel something. I don't know what good that does anybody. People grieve, people make mistakes, people leave, people cry, and it's part of, I think, also our human experience. And there's nothing wrong with being human. The teaching I receive is about letting the aspect of each of us that knows who it is, or the divine self, run the show, and let the personality self be present, but not the one commandeering a reality, because all it knows is what it's had. It doesn't know more than that.
Yeah, that's very insightful, and the over-identification with spiritual growth and development that's going to be easy. I think that's it, and I think a part of the community has some fault to that, because there are a lot of people who do say, "Yeah, oh yeah, spirituality is easy. Look at me, I'm enlightened," and that really causes someone false expectations that they're going to have to go through life, and if anything's hard, it's not for them. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And identifying with your life being a human life that goes through hard things is definitely something not everybody does, but it does help you grow. It does expand everything. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I tend to be wary when someone announces themselves as enlightened. I tend to get a little cautious around it, because I think people that probably aren't announcing it. They're probably, the guides I work with have said, the most enlightened person in the community might well be the crossing guard at the school, not the person, with the Instagram following, and, the prayer mat. I don't know. I think everybody's different. I don't think it needs to be hard. I'm going to say that, but I think it comes with the territory and growth and life, and that we learn our lessons as we need to learn them. And some of that, I think, comes at a soul level. We get the lessons we came for in different ways.
Yeah, and something you said too stuck out with me. The expression that we are is the thing that helps us expand the most and helps us get back in alignment with our true self. A lot of people, who do jobs for minimum wage, they're
Mhm.
really upset by that. But I've had some experiences where someone handing me a coffee with a smile on their face was actually the thing that helped me have a better day, because everything was going crazy before that point, and I'm like, oh man, people are kind, people are
Yeah.
good. And you know if people are having a rough time with that expression, what are some things they can do to kind of get themselves into a place where they're either going towards the right expression, or
Yeah.
making good of what expression they're using right now?
I mean, practical tools are simple. The guides say the action of fear is to claim more fear, and every choice we make in fear gets us more of the same. So one of the things that I do better than I've ever done, although I still make, slip ups occasionally, is not to make choices based in fear. And that actually clears up a lot of problems before they even get to happen. Um, Tell the truth. That makes a huge difference. The guides have said there's not a lie that's ever been told that wasn't told in fear. So stay true, stay honest, and stay true. And then, the old thing, be grateful, and that's hard sometimes. But there's always something to find. And that actually creates a room for more. When I was first in my process of growing spiritually or opening up, my early sobriety in New York at 25 was at the height of the AIDS epidemic. People that I knew were dying all around me. I had no money, no money. I mean, I was literally, people were telling me to go for day labor, and I had a master's degree. And I was almost as dysfunctional as one could probably be. But I had this belief at that time that if I hung out through this, if I made it through this, life would get better. And it did. And it didn't do it on my timeline in the way that I thought it should. But when I look back at my life during those years, I was always taken care of. I always had a place to stay. I always had food. And there were times when I literally had 45 cents to my name. I can't imagine it now. I look back and go, how did you make it through that? But I was learning a whole lot. But in my case, I had to stay grateful for simple things. And then that was able to build. And it's like a muscle, like faith can be like a muscle, and gratitude can create more.
Yeah, you said you went through alcoholism too at that early
Mhm.
point.
Yeah.
I had a nice little 9-year opiate addiction from pain
Mhm.
medicine. And when I got through, the thing I've noticed with everyone who made it through and who stayed in the sobriety, they often had gone through so many hard things through their addiction that their personality seemed lighter. They were able
Mhm.
to enjoy the things that weren't
Yeah.
insane a lot more than people who never had gone through it. Um, uh, can you share with us some things that your addiction taught you in overcoming that addiction?
Well, I mean, I was a fun drunk mostly. I was a sweet, fun drunk, but I was also completely irresponsible. I mean, I took out tons of student loans. I actually didn't understand that I was supposed to pay them back. I thought somebody was just giving me money, and I had a very high bar bill in New Haven. So boy, was I out to lunch. I didn't know I didn't get it. I don't know. I mean, it's like, why? I'm 62 years old. I'm learning to drive now. But it took me till I was 50 to get out of debt, to pay off those loans. So I learned a lot about responsibility and self-care, and I'm still learning about kindness. But what my experience, less so through the addiction, but through the recovery, was I learned, I think, great compassion for people. Um, I came not from enormous privilege, but I was a white guy. I went to school. I had a working mother, one parent, and we didn't have a lot of money. We were, middle class family, but I wasn't wanting, And when then I was so broken, I was getting clean in Times Square at the midnight meeting, I was getting clean with people that were unlike people that I would ever have met, and they were remarkable, remarkable people. And they taught me great love. They really, really did when I look back on it. And they didn't even know that they were doing it. But my self-esteem was so horribly low at that point, and it stayed low for a few years, that, I was grateful for that. So, and I don't have that problem now. It's gone, and I'm grateful for that, or has been for, 37 years or something now. And I'm great. And who knows, who knows? But it's part of my path, and it was part of what, frankly, allowed me permission to have a spiritual life when I didn't know that I could have one. And that was a huge gift as well. And do I wish it had been different? I don't know. This is what happened for me. I'm not living the life that I thought I was expected to live at all. Totally, totally the opposite. And this is a remarkable life that I'm privileged to live, and I have to remember to be grateful for it, because I can always find something to complain about.
Yeah, that can definitely be a thing, and congratulations on doing that too. I know not everybody gets through those things, but that's amazing. And also, just commented, you said you're 62 and you look fabulous for 62. Yeah, that self-care has gone a long way for you, and working with energy too tends to help a lot in that aspect when you're working with it a lot. So thank you. Well, I want to get here in a few minutes. We're gonna do something that I call the lightning round. It's just a few questions about things, so we can get to know you as a person. I'm sure everybody knows you as a channeler, a medium, author, but to get to know you as a person. But before we get there, I just wanted to ask you: are there any things that you feel are important to talk about in the collective? Things that you see kind of going on as a theme in the collective that we haven't talked about that you feel is important for people to kind of understand or know a little bit?
I think things are coming up to be seen. I think that the big discussion has to always be how we treat each other, how we care for each other, how we support each other, and this understanding that the things that we fight over are primarily ideas and borders and economics and things like that, and these again are all creations, but that we forget to care for each other in the midst of the need to be right. So I don't know, I think these discussions are beginning to happen, and I'm hopeful that they'll continue to.
Well, absolutely, and I appreciate that aspect. During the pandemic, I noticed a lot of loved ones, a lot of people who are very close, even the community at a larger sense. It just got so fractured with arguing and fighting. And I always told, anytime I could, without trying to interject myself, tell people, hey, this person believes this thing that you feel wildly different about for a reason. And if we can find that reason. But I think you mentioned something earlier that hit me pretty hard. All those decisions that people had made that brought an outcome that wasn't fun was probably solved in fear. And I noticed the fear in both sides of the arguments. One person feared to lose their life, one person feared to lose their freedom, but those whole fears were what was driving the arguing and fighting about so much of it.
Well, the guides I work with have always said self-righteousness is always the small self. It's always the personality self. And if somebody needs to be right at the cost of someone else being wrong, it's coming at a low level. It's just, I'm a believer in free will, but I'm also a believer in responsibility and community mindedness, which means the guides I work with say, you are your brother's keeper, whatever that looks like. So I tend not to engage in the fray.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's kind of the whole purpose. If we're all one, then the things that we do and say to other people, we're doing that to ourselves to a degree. And even if you have to take a selfish stance like that to appreciate the fact that this happens, yeah, by all means. Thank you for sharing too. I want to go into lightning round. It's a bunch of basic
Mhm.
questions that are just designed to get to know you. They're silly, but if you don't want to answer one, by all means, please pass. Nothing. It's all benevolent. So,
All right. Sounds good.
all right. We'll start off with what's your favorite color?
Huh. I'm going to say blue, which surprised me because it's not. But you know, I've been wearing black I since I was in high school. So um, my favorite color is actually green. If there was a color spectrum in front of me,
Beautiful. Thank you. What is your favorite food?
pasta, which I'm not allowed to eat.
Yeah, I've had my wars with pasta too. I have to stay away from it, but it is a lovely, beautiful thing. Um, what's your favorite band and or song?
My favorite band. I don't know that I have a favorite band anymore. Maybe Patti Smith. I always liked Patti Smith. My favorite song, it's Leonard Cohen. Maybe Take This Longing or Suzanne would be two of them.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard Leonard Cohen before, but I only know about him because one of the album covers that he did, where he was standing by the porthole of a ship, the little window in the ship, was something that my favorite band used and photoshopped themselves in that picture. So, but I'll have to listen and give them a listen.
I've been listening to those guys since I was 16 or something. So my musical tastes haven't changed all that much.
I hear the band who copied them I've been listening to since I was 14, and that's who I
Yeah.
listen to a lot now too still. Um, Thank you. And what's your favorite animal?
My dog, Lily.
Your dog's name is Lily?
Yeah.
Ah, amazing. Our daughter's name is Lilith, and we call her
Wow.
Lily all the time. So I have an
Good.
affection for that name very much. So, thank you for sharing that. Um, Out of all the places you've been, and I know you've been around the world, what was your favorite place for the beauty of the nature there, but also the feeling of the nature there?
It's where I am now. It's Maui.
Yeah, I've got a friend who's a channeler who lives there too. His name's Sean Swanson, and he loves it. He would never leave in a million years if someone gave
Mhm.
him all the money in the world.
Uh-huh.
I've not been there though. I definitely am looking forward to going there sometime soon. Um, all right, last question will be, what's your favorite childhood memory?
Huh. I think it was sitting at my father's feet, talking with him when I would have been about 4 or 5. He died when I was 5, so there are very few memories, but that was a very good one.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I lost my father. I was fortunate enough to have him until I was 35, but he
Mhm.
died in 2015, and that was a rough patch for
Mhm.
myself and family. But thank you for sharing that. I do appreciate it. I want to give you an opportunity to kind of share, things that you have going on, how to find you, how to contact you, where to find anything. But before we do that, I just wanted to say, I know you're extremely busy dude, and taking time out to join us. I absolutely appreciate. And reading through part of the book before we got to today, a lot of things that were said there were very insightful. I don't often enjoy other channeled material just because I
Mhm.
don't expose it unless I'm doing research or something. But it was absolutely great, well written, very thought provoking, and very heart centered. So I really appreciate the work that you do. And you've been one of the longer time channelers that have been. So you helped open an industry for people all over who are just starting to publicly channel now, or,
Mhm.
or someone like me has been doing it for a
Yeah, I
little
just
while.
lost you again for some reason.
Oh, you there? All right, can you hear me
No, yeah,
now?
I'm here. I just lost you for a second.
Okay.
Um, so the question was, what do I have coming up? And thank you for everything you just said. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
What do I have coming up? I am doing a big retreat on Maui, a 5-day retreat I think it's this spring. I think it's in April. So come to Maui, and I've got events coming up in London and Dublin and Italy. this summer, and I do a monthly live stream. So the guides teach most Wednesdays every week, and then I do these intensives once a month, which are 5 days, 2 hours a day. We send you the recording and the transcripts of the sessions if you can't make it. But those tend to be pretty intense, and they do the energy work and they get everybody attuned. And all the information is just up on my website, which is my name. It's just paulselig.com.
All right. Well, beautiful. And we'll have the links to your website and bio in the description for everyone to come check out your work. Thank you again, Paul, for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was a nice talk. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And everyone, join us next week, Wednesday at 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern. That's 7 Pacific. RJ Spinner will be here with us. And keep your eye on all the social media, Facebook, website, etc., to see all the things coming up and all of our guests here in the near future and beyond. Thank you all for joining us. I really appreciate you guys being here. I love you guys, and we'll see you next week on the other side. Goodbye.